What type of law do you want to practice? Not only is it the most common question you're going to get, it is also the most difficult one to answer. Hey guys, welcome to the First Year Law School and Lawyering, a podcast about the two most profound moments in your law school and lawyering career, the first year of law school and your first year as a lawyer. I am your host, 1L and new lawyer coach, Angela Vorpahl, and this podcast is for you if you are heading into law school or heading into your first year as a practicing lawyer and are not 100% sure what in the world is going on, because none of us were at those two moments in time. So the question of what type of law do you want to practice doesn't sound like an insane one, right? And yet the truly honest response that it evokes 100% of the time is, I don't know. How could I possibly know? There's no way I can know. Even if I think I know, I don't really know. But in a profession that is hyper specialized and hyper niche, it's pretty nuts that we as law students don't have the ability to answer this question, especially since it's asked of us all the time as incoming law students, as current law students, as new lawyers. So let's talk about it. So there are a few reasons why this question of what type of law do you want to practice is so hard to answer. And the first big one is a total lack of exposure to different areas of the law. So most of us heading into law school have never had any type of legal or law adjacent job. Most of us have never had interactions with attorneys, have definitely never done any substantive legal work or even been close. And even those of us who have had law adjacent jobs, we're talking about maybe exposure to one or two different types of law. So even for someone like me who came into law school with some exposure to the law, I had interned at the state legislature, worked there for a few years, and so technically came into contact with hundreds of laws. I didn't have any exposure to actual substantive legal work or legal projects or what that would even look like. And as ironic as it sounds, this lack of exposure actually continues through into law school. And so when we think about law school generally, and 1L year specifically, law school courses are very litigation based. And so what litigation is, kind of in a nutshell, is a lawsuit between two parties that are trying to resolve a conflict. And so when you think about 1L year courses, you're thinking about reading cases and writing memos and making oral arguments. And all of that is litigation based. That is in no way touching the entire other world of law and practice areas that fall under the umbrella of transactional law or corporate law. And even when you get into the upper level courses of 2L year and 3L year, those courses are not substantive in nature, they're academic in nature. So we're not even getting touches on how these different areas of the law are being practiced or tasks and projects that we're going to be given in the real world. And then even one level removed from that, the extracurriculars are also very, very litigation based. And so when you think about law review, that's all about researching and citation checking and writing. Mock trial is all about the steps to actually put on and execute a trial. Moot court is all about writing an appellate brief and making an appellate oral argument. And so very few law schools have any courses or extracurriculars that have to do with the transactional law or corporate law. The other thing that surprises a lot of people about law school in and of itself in terms of trying to help law students make this decision or answer this question about what type of law I want to practice is that law school doesn't have any specializations. So unlike what I understand medical school to be, which is where you can have different tracks and you can focus on different areas of the body or different expertises or that type of thing. In law school, we don't have that. I think the most that some law schools have is what they call a certification program, where you take 3 additional courses in one area of the law. And even that, you can take those courses in areas of the law that you'll never actually practice, like constitutional law. And so we don't really have the substantive or the expertise specific sort of guidance or tracks in law school that I think a lot of people assume and reasonably assume should exist or would exist in law school. The other thing that makes this question of what type of law do I want to practice difficult to answer is that we actually have very few bites at the apple in terms of getting substantive legal experience in law school. And so traditionally, the bites at the apple or the opportunities you're going to get over the course of 3 years are going to be your 1L summer job, your 2L summer job, and if you play your cards right, you can also get a 2L spring externship and potentially a 3L fall or spring clinic or part-time job. And so we're really looking at 3, maybe 4 opportunities to actually do substantive legal work before you graduate and help that inform what type of legal organization or law firm you might want to practice at, the practice area, the types of matters you want to work on. And so it's just not nearly as prevalent as people think it is heading into law school. And most recently, what makes this question even more difficult to answer, given the accelerated recruiting timeline in law school, literally in the last year or two, is that you very well may find yourself in a position where you have to accept a job offer for your 1L summer, potentially even for your 2L summer, that's going to lead to your job at your full-time job after graduation before you get any bites at these apples. And so the 1L students that I am coaching this year are applying for jobs November 1 of their first semester of law school, interviewing for jobs January of their second semester of law school. And again, these jobs are going to project out into the future 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years out. And they have never had a substantive legal job to be able to help them make this decision about what type of law do I want to actually practice. Now, all of that being said, just because we don't have all of the information doesn't mean we don't have any of the information. And yes, getting to an answer to this question within the structure of law school and the way that the courses are offered and taught and the extracurriculars are made available and the substantive legal work bites at the apple are sort of realistically in our grasp is difficult. Yes, but that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. And so when we think about sort of the action steps that we can take to get closer to the answer to this question, or at least shed some light on how we want to start thinking about this, a few things that you can sort of keep on your to-do list and keep at the forefront of your mind. And one of those things is, of course, your law school courses. So I will say that I would put far less emphasis on this than most people think, just because law school courses, again, are very academic in nature. There is very little real world task project sort of substantive skills that are being taught in law school courses. So don't necessarily think just because you might want to be a wills and estates attorney, or you might want to be an IP litigator, that you necessarily would have to take those courses, but every little piece helps. And so yes, taking law school courses over the subject matter of the thing you think you might want to practice can definitely give you some initial understanding of at least the bases of the law that practice area might touch upon. The second thing, which is going to be even more substantively valuable to you, are going to be law school extracurriculars. And so I know that we talked about how these tend to be very litigation heavy. So this is going to help you more if you think you might be interested in litigation. But yeah, mock trial, moot court are the two big ones, law review to a much lesser extent. And some law schools are trying to develop extracurriculars that are more transaction-based, sort of negotiations or deal drafting. And so if you think you might be interested in those areas, that's a way to sort of get some context and some insight for those different practice areas without having to sit through a 4-month course that doesn't actually tell you how to do any of the things that practice area would do. Far and away, the best thing that I ever did in law school, and consistently that I hear from my students too, in terms of getting substantive experience in that law school container, are legal clinics, law school clinics. And so in those clinics, you are literally going to be a student lawyer, and then your professor is your supervising attorney, and you are actually going to be representing clients within that clinic. And so you actually get to see and do things like starting a business entity if you're in the small business clinic, or helping people, I assume, with IRS audits if you're in the tax clinic, or representing criminal defendants if you're in the criminal justice clinic like I was. And so that's a really, really great way, and I would argue the best way, to get hands-on experience in that law school container. Another great way to start peeling back the layers of this really big question of what type of law do you want to practice is talking to humans who are doing these jobs right now that you think you might want to do. And I know this isn't a novel idea, but as simple and straightforward and obvious as it sounds, very few people actually do this because it takes time and it takes energy and it feels vulnerable and all of the things. But if you can sort of get into a rhythm of talking to people, meaning talking to lawyers who are practicing the types of law you think you might want to practice and the cities you think you might want to be practicing them, in the law firms you think you might want to be practicing in them in, that's really going to give you real world, data driven sort of information and conversational insight into what are these lawyers doing on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis. What does it look like walking into the office, sitting down, and then doing the work and leaving for the day? And so I'm going to drop underneath this episode in the show notes, in the description, if you're watching the YouTube video, steps for informational interviews, because that is by far the most genuine and effective way that I have ever seen, heard, or experienced to actually get at this information and start to understand what it is that lawyers actually do. I'll also drop another resource in the show notes and in the description that talks through bite-size descriptions of the different practice areas. So you can at least start to even know what practice areas are out there if you're really starting from a totally blank slate of what types of law actually even exist out there. And then, of course, the big one, the one that I threw so much shade at earlier, which is actually the bites at the apple during law school, right? For the actual professional experiences. So again, just because we can't get all the bites at the apple doesn't mean we can't get any. And so 1L summer is 12, 13, 14 weeks. And you can 100% and absolutely should get an internship your 1L summer. And if you play your cards right, you can split your summer, which means that for 6 to 7 weeks, you intern or work at one law firm or legal organization, and 6 to 7 weeks, you work at another one. That's not always the easiest thing to do because most organizations either want you for the full summer or want you for that first half, but it is doable. I did do it personally, and I've had 1L students who have done it as well. So that is a way to get yet another chance to see another practice area, another legal organization in action. And for those of you guys who are actually in your first year of law school and are looking for your 1L summer job, applying to 1L summer jobs, interviewing for 1L summer jobs, and want a really clear and structured breakdown of how to go about landing your very first 1L summer job, definitely check out the show notes, the description below. It's going to have a link to Land Your 1L Summer Job, which is a do-it-yourself course that I put together that really breaks down each of those steps, each of those strategies, so that you know exactly what law firms want to hear and how you can make yourself the ideal candidate for those jobs and let them know that you are the best 1L summer associate and 1L summer lawyer they could ever hire. So that professional experience is far and away the best in terms of getting information as to the types of practice areas you might want to apply for and be involved in, for sure. Now, taking any or all of those steps is always a good idea. Being more informed, having more exposure, sort of educating yourself about the opportunities and options out there. Always, always, always a fan of it. Always great to do, and very few people actually do it. So applauses and celebrations and jazz hands to you if you actually take any of these steps. That being said, I am going to say the thing that nobody really wants to hear probably, which is how the vast majority of us as law students actually go about making this decision about what type of law we're going to practice, specifically right out of law school. And the answer to this is we practice the type of law of the job that's offered to us. And I know that sounds incredibly mercenary and potentially very uninspiring, but that's the reality. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's just that we are making this decision about the type of law that we want to practice right out of law school with such incomplete information, right? So we're talking about the courses we're taking in law school, the few, if any, internships or externships or clinics that we've done up to this point in time when we have to make this decision. And also the reality that there are hundreds of different legal practice areas out there, and there's no way that we could get exposure to all of them. Also, the fact that most of us heading into law school, and even once we're in law school, don't have just one practice area that we have always wanted to work our entire lives. Or even if we do go into law school being one of those people that thinks that they want to practice criminal law, or thinks they want to practice family law, or thinks that they want to practice constitutional law or international law without actually knowing what that even means or what that even is. Once we're in law school, we start to get exposure to and information about other types of law that exist that we just didn't have access to before, right? And so there's so many of us, I would say the vast majority of us, if not all of us, that actually could practice lots of different areas of the law and have a fulfilling and successful career, because there's a lot of overlap in these different niches in the law, a lot of overlap in the skill sets and the types of tasks you're going to do, the projects you're going to work on, the clients that you're going to work with and work for. And so it's not to say that there's only one type of law that we would enjoy or be good at or want to do. And so it's not as easy as taking a Harry Potter type quiz and falling into the one niche that you would be happy in and successful in, which I think is good news, honestly. The other part of this equation is that most of us are going to be in a position to have maybe 1, 2, 3 job offers on the table that we're actually choosing from, if we're choosing from any at all. And so for those of us who only have one job offer on the table, that kind of sort of makes the decision for us of what type of law we're going to practice. And even the people, those of us who might have a few different job offers on the table, a lot of the times, because we're making this decision on incomplete information, we might choose the thing and the aspect and the factor that's most important to us, which could be the city where we're going to practice. It could be the starting salary that they offer us. It could be the practice area that we choose that just sounds the coolest. A lot of the time, though, where we are going to practice or the type of law we're going to practice is going to be decided by the employer who's offering us the job, because they are the ones that have a specific need to fill. Maybe there's a practice area that is really busy, and so they need junior lawyer help. Or maybe they had some associates leave recently, and so they have holes in their junior lawyer base and they need to fill those. And so a lot of the time, even when we choose the law firm or the legal organization we're working for, they tell us what practice area they want us in. And again, as we were talking about before, since there are lots of different types of law that we could potentially practice or be good at or enjoy, it makes it very difficult to fight back on a particular job offer or practice area that we've been given, because we don't really have a lot of reason or need to do that other than to just say yes, and I'm happy to be of service and be a value add to the team and contribute to the work based on whatever it is you need. So all in all, when it comes to the question of what type of law do you want to practice, it is not your fault for not knowing. There is so much out there and so little that we're exposed to, even during the course of law school. And sort of the second piece of that, even though we can't know everything, doesn't mean we can't know anything. And so definitely take the action steps and have the conversations and do the projects and the courses and the extracurriculars and the professional experiences that give you some more of that information. And my favorite part of all of this, no matter what you do, it's not going to matter anyway, because statistically, you're going to take the job that's offered to you. So I hate to end on such a down note, but I guess kind of the silver lining to this is, even if you are among those of us who took the job offer of the type of law that we were offered, doesn't mean you're not going to like it, and doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy it, and doesn't mean you're not going to be amazing at it. Because again, there's so many types of law that you can enjoy and be amazing at and have a really fulfilling career doing. So with that, guys, if you want more law school and lawyering magic, you can click on the link in the show notes if you're listening to this on Spotify, or in the description if you're watching this on YouTube, and be added to my email list that I send out inspiring and informational and fantastical things every week for you guys to be able to move forward in your law school and legal careers. If you have any questions or thoughts about what we covered in the podcast episode, definitely drop them in the comments below. I love reading them on Spotify, on YouTube, and they also are going to inspire future podcast episodes. So if you want to know how I wound up becoming a patent litigator with absolutely no scientific or mathematical background, you can drop IP litigator or Angela's story in the comments, and I'll know that you guys want me to make a podcast episode on that, for example. And so, yeah, I'm always looking for future inspiration and different topics that you guys want me to talk about or cover. So definitely drop any of that stuff in the comments as well. And if you heard anything, learned anything, took away anything that sparked something for you as an aspiring law student or as a new lawyer, definitely give the podcast a 5-star rating. I am told that anything less than 5 stars is really sad and really pathetic and really means you hated it. So please consider the 5-star rating if you haven't rated it yet on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. On YouTube, you can't rate it, but you can click the subscribe button so that you are notified every time that I release a new podcast episode. And with that, guys, I hope that this was as wonderful for you hearing it as it was for me making it. And I will see you guys in the next episode.